Not legend, but the ordinary grind of a world on the brink. While poets paint sieges with flaming swords and heroic shouts, the real Carthage of 149 BC smells of brine, cracked amphorae, and a market stall where the olives are as stale as the promises of peace. If a slow, steady recounting of that twilight helps you unwind, feel free to like, share, or simply listen. There's no need for applause, only the soft rustle of pages turning. You're welcome to leave a quiet comment, perhaps where you first heard of Carthage, or whether you're drifting off now or still watching the distant tread of Roman sandals. The fire in the hearth wanes, the night grows deeper, and the stone walls of the Biasa cast long, calm shadows that invite you to step gently into the story. You stir before the sun has fully lifted, the thin veil of morning already settled on the cobbles of the Tophet quarter, like a sigh that has lingered through the night. The shutters of the market stalls hang half open, their wooden slats clattering softly in a rhythm that feels more like a reminder than a warning. Dust settled from the previous day's traffic stirs just enough to catch the pale light and turn the stones a muted ochre. The air carries the faint, sweet tang of barley porridge drifting from a neighbor's kitchen, a scent that has survived wars and sieges and now insists on its place at the table of daily life. It is a small insistence, a quiet claim that hearth and home still demand their breakfast, even when the horizon holds the shape of an empire. Beyond the narrow lane, a lone Roman standard stands on the ridge, its red eagle catching the first rays and throwing a brief flash of crimson across the sky. The bird's metal feathers glint like a rumor carried on the wind, a promise of discipline and conquest that feels as distant as the chant of Cato the Elder, Carthago delenda est, that once echoed through the Senate. The phrase now hangs in the air, not as a shouted command, but as a low hum that the city has learned to hear without flinching. You watch the eagle's shadow slide over the walls, and for a moment the stone seems to breathe with the memory of that ancient warning, then settles back into its own steady pulse. Your eyes travel to the massive walls of the Biasa, the ancient citadel that has guarded your family for generations. First raised in the 3rd century BC, the walls have been patched and repaired countless times, each layer of mortar a testament to resilience. Fresh mortar still glistens in the lower sections, a pale line that marks the most recent effort to mend the scars left by Roman siege works. The stones themselves are worn, their edges softened by centuries of wind and rain, yet they retain a stubborn solidity that feels almost comforting. You run a fingertip along a rough patch, feeling the cool grit of limestone under your skin, and a faint ache rises in your forearm where a scar from a previous harvest's cart repair still lingers. It is a reminder that the body, like the wall, bears the marks of labor and survival. The city's council gathers in the shadow of the walls, its members cloaked in the muted colors of authority. At its head sits the aged magistrate Hanno, his beard white as the limestone that surrounds him, his voice low and measured as he whispers the latest news to those who will act upon it. He tells of the legions of Lucius Marcius Censorinus, which arrived under the cover of night, their sandals silent on the packed earth as they set up a circumvallation that now hums around the city like a bored bee. The term circumvallation feels almost too grand for the simple wooden palisades and earthworks that snake along the outer perimeter, but the language of war insists on its grandeur. You note the way Hanno's eyes linger on the line of Roman stakes, as if trying to read the intentions hidden in the spacing of each post. You pull the worn linen dress tighter around your shoulders. the fabric thin but familiar, its fibers softened by countless washes and the occasional spill of oil or wine. The dress hangs loosely over your hips, the hem brushing the cool stone floor as you step forward. The floor itself is a mosaic of cracked tiles, each fissure a story of footfalls and forgotten moments. The coolness of the stone seeps through the soles of your sandals, a sensation that steadies the mind as much as any prayer. You pause for a breath, feeling the air move through the arches that frame the outer wall, the arches that have watched caravans and soldiers alike pass beneath them. The wind slips through the stone, a soft whisper that carries the distant clang of Roman metal and the faint, almost imperceptible sigh of the city's own heart. The market's shutters creak a little more as the wind nudges them, and you hear the muffled murmur of voices beginning to rise from the inner streets. The sound is not a clamor of panic, but a low, steady murmur, like the hum of a loom that has been working for hours without interruption. You think of the merchants who will soon arrange their stalls, of the copper pots that will gleam in the morning light, of the figs that will be laid out to dry in the sun. Even the routine of trade feels like an act of defiance, a quiet assertion that life will not be halted by the presence of an eagle's shadow. A thin ribbon of smoke curls from a hearth somewhere nearby, the scent of burning wood mingling with the lingering aroma of the porridge. The smoke drifts lazily, curling around the stone arches before disappearing into the open sky. It is a reminder that fire still burns within the city's homes, that warmth is still kindled despite the cold calculations of distant generals. You watch the smoke rise, its movement slow and deliberate, and you feel a small, almost imperceptible smile tug at the corner of your mouth. The irony is gentle. The Romans bring their disciplined formations and engineered siege works, yet the city's own rhythm, its breath, its fire, its simple meals, remains untouched, stubbornly ordinary. You turn your gaze back to the walls, to the fresh mortar that still glistens in the early light. The stones, though pocked with scars, hold a quiet dignity. They have seen the rise of Carthage's navy, the thunder of Hannibal's elephants, the quiet surrender of the city after the Third Punic War, and now the patient encirclement of a new legion. Each layer of stone, each patch of mortar, is a layer of memory, a reminder that the city is built not only of rock but of stories, of promises kept and broken, of generations that have learned to breathe in the same air as their ancestors. A distant bell tolls, its tone low and resonant, marking the hour with a sound that has survived the clatter of swords and the march of armies. The bell's vibration travels through the stone, through the walls, through your own chest, aligning your heartbeat with the city's pulse. You close your eyes for a moment, allowing the sound to settle into the corners of your mind, to smooth the edges of any lingering unease. The bell does not announce danger. It simply marks time, as if to say that the world continues its slow turning, regardless of the shadows that gather at its edges. The wind picks up just enough to rustle the leaves of a small olive tree that clings to the outer wall, its branches bent by years of salt and sun. The leaves whisper against each other, a soft susurrus that blends with the distant hum of Roman engineers. You watch a single leaf detach and drift down, spiraling gently before it lands on the stone, its green veins a stark contrast to the gray of the mortar. It is a small, almost trivial event, yet it feels like a reminder that life continues in the smallest of motions, that even a leaf can find its place on a wall that has stood for centuries. You inhale the morning air, feeling the coolness fill your lungs, the faint taste of iron from the distant Roman encampment mixing with the salt of the sea that lies beyond the harbor. The breath steadies, each inhalation a quiet affirmation that you are present, that you are part of this city's ongoing story. You let the air linger, allowing the subtle scent of barley, stone, and distant fire to settle within you, to become part of the rhythm you carry in your chest. As the sun climbs higher, its light spreads across the walls, turning the fresh mortar from pale gray to a soft amber. The shadows retreat, the darkness receding like a tide that has finally given way to the shore. You stand still for a moment, feeling the weight of the stone beneath your feet, the pull of the city's history in your veins, the faint echo of Cato's chant softened by the day's gentle light. The world around you is a tapestry of stone, wind, and quiet resolve, each thread woven with care, each moment a stitch in the fabric of endurance. You turn away from the wall, the day already beginning to settle into its own measured pace. The market will soon awaken fully, the Roman engineers will continue their patient work, and the city will keep its breath steady, as it always has. In this quiet dawn, you find a steadiness that does not demand heroics, only the simple act of being present, of feeling the stone, the wind, the light, and allowing them to settle into you like a soft, familiar lullaby. The morning settles into you, and you let the sun has already risen enough to lift the thin veil of light from the roofs of the Tophet quarter, and the market awakens with the soft rustle of canvas awnings being drawn back. You step onto the worn stone of the agora, each footfall echoing faintly against the ancient paving that has carried countless merchants, soldiers, and children for generations. The air is cool, carrying a faint mist that clings to the lower walls like a sigh, and it carries with it the mingled aromas of the city. The sweet, earthy perfume of barley porridge that drifted from a neighbor's doorway this morning, the sharp tang of sea salt that follows the tide up the harbor, and the faint, lingering incense of Baal Hammon that still clings to the stone of a nearby shrine stalls line the square in orderly rows, their wooden frames painted in muted shades of indigo, ochre, and the dull copper of aged metal. The colors are not bright, they have been softened by years of sun and wind, the pigments faded to a gentle, almost nostalgic hue. A weaver's table displays bolts of wool that have been dyed in the traditional Punic method, the fibers holding a deep, muted blue that seems to drink the light rather than reflect it. Beside it, a copper pot glints faintly, its surface pitted by use, the metal bearing the soft patina of countless meals prepared over its rim. A young boy, perhaps no older than 10, pushes a low cart laden with salted fish. The fish are laid out in a single, orderly layer, their silver skins catching the morning light in brief, fleeting flashes. The scent that rises from them is a briny, almost metallic perfume that mingles with the faint odor of sweat that clings to the boy's skin, a reminder that even the simplest labor leaves its mark. He moves with a measured rhythm, his feet finding the familiar grooves in the stone, his hands gripping the wooden handles of the cart as though they were extensions of his own arms. Occasionally he glances toward the shrine, where a small flame flickers behind a bronze offering bowl, its smoke curling upward in lazy spirals. You pause beside a potter's stall, where a man named Mago works with a concentration that seems to slow time itself. His hands are stained with the reddish hue of clay, the texture of the material evident in the fine lines that have formed on his forearms. A small wound on his palm catches your eye, a splinter from a broken amphora that has not bled much, yet it stands as a quiet testament to the way even the most ordinary tools can betray their makers. He does not flinch as you approach. Instead, he offers you a cup of mulled wine, the liquid warm and amber, its surface marked by a thin film of condensation that catches the light. The taste is flat, the spices muted, as if the wine itself were aware of the promises it once carried, promises of truce and peace that have never truly arrived. You sip slowly, feeling the warmth spread through your chest, a gentle counterpoint to the coolness of the stone beneath your feet. Across the way, a woman with a simple linen kerchief wrapped tightly around her head leans over a basket of figs. The figs are a deep, dusky brown, their skins wrinkled from the sun's relentless heat, the fruit inside still soft and fragrant. She mutters in a low voice about the shortage of wheat, her words barely audible over the market's hum. She recalls the grain shipments that once arrived from Sicily, a memory that feels both distant and immediate, as if the sacks of barley and wheat that were once unloaded at the harbor still echo in the empty spaces of the city's granaries. The Treaty of 241 BC, which forced Carthage to rely on its own modest harvests, is mentioned in passing, a historical footnote that now shapes the very texture of the bread on the tables of the poor. You exchange a discreet smile with an old friend, a fellow citizen whose eyes have grown sharper with the passing of each day. He nods toward the western edge of the market, where a group of Roman legionary engineers have begun to assemble wooden towers. The timber is raw, the beams still bearing the green sap of the forest, the construction slow and methodical, as if the Romans themselves were bored by the task. The sight is both absurd and inevitable, a reminder that the city's ancient walls, built in the 3rd century BC and now pocked with fresh mortar, must now accommodate the presence of foreign hands shaping new structures within sight of the bias of the market's murmur, is a low, steady rhythm, a sound that seems to pulse in time with the beating of your own heart. You watch a merchant arrange his wares, copper pots of varying sizes, each one bearing a faint dent where a previous owner's hand may have slipped. The pots are stacked in a careful pyramid, the base solid, the apex precariously balanced, a visual metaphor for the city's own precarious balance between endurance and surrender. A thin veil of dust hangs in the air, catching the light in tiny, glittering specks that drift lazily down like soft snow, settling on the shoulders of those who pass beneath. A child darts between the stalls, his feet barely making a sound on the stone, his laughter a brief, bright note that rises above the market's hum before fading into the distance. He clutches a small bundle of dried figs, the fruit's skin cracked and slightly bruised, the same bruising you notice later on the pomegranate you will eat in the courtyard. The parallel is subtle, a quiet echo of the city's own wounds, yet it feels comforting in its simplicity. You pause near a stall selling dyed wool, the fabric hanging in long, uneven strips that sway gently with each passing breeze. The wool is coarse, the dye uneven, the colors muted, shades of indigo that have been softened by the sun, browns that have taken on a grayish hue. The weaver, a woman whose hands are calloused from years of turning thread into cloth, offers you a piece of fabric to feel. It is rough against your skin, the fibers catching slightly, a reminder that even the most delicate of creations retain a hint of their origin. She smiles faintly, a dry humor in her eyes as she remarks that the Romans could learn a thing or two about patience from the way they build their towers. If only they would apply the same patience to weaving, perhaps the walls would be less prone to cracking. A merchant selling copper pots leans against his stall, his back against a wall that bears the faint imprint of a Roman legionary boot. He offers you a small copper bowl, its surface polished to a dull sheen, the metal warm from the morning sun. He tells you, in a voice that carries the weight of many market days, that the copper was mined from the hills to the north, carried over rough roads by oxen and men whose faces are as weathered as the stone beneath their feet. The story is simple, the details unadorned, yet it grounds the object in a chain of labor that stretches far beyond the market's confines. The market's rhythm continues, each transaction a soft beat in the larger pulse of the city. A baker pushes a cart laden with flatbread, the dough still warm, the scent of yeast rising in gentle curls. A fisherman repairs a net, the rope fraying at the edges, the knots tight and deliberate. A potter shapes a new amphora, the clay spinning slowly on the wheel, the sound a low, soothing hum that blends with the distant clatter of Roman hammers on siege towers. A metronome that seems both purposeful and absurdly patient. You find a quiet moment near the edge of the square, where a low stone wall separates the market from a narrow alley. The wall is cool to the touch, its surface worn smooth by countless hands that have rested upon it over the centuries. You rest your palm against it, feeling the faint vibrations of the market's life flow through the stone, a subtle reminder that the city's foundations are as much emotional as they are physical. A thin breeze drifts through the market, carrying with it the faint sound of a lyre being plucked somewhere beyond the stalls. The music is soft, its notes lingering in the air like a whispered prayer. It blends with the murmur of voices, the clink of copper, the rustle of wool, and the distant, rhythmic thudding of Roman feet as they march in formation beyond the city walls. The soundscape is a tapestry of contrasts, peaceful and tense, ancient and new, familiar and foreign. Yet each thread is woven with a calm deliberateness that steadies your breathing. You notice a small, cracked amphora lying near a potter's stall, its shards scattered across the stone. The vessel once held oil, perhaps, or wine, its contents long spilled and absorbed by the earth. The broken pieces glint faintly in the morning light, a reminder that even the most durable objects can fracture under pressure. You pick up a shard, its edges smooth from years of wear, and turn it over in your hand. The weight is light, the surface cool, and for a moment you imagine the amphora whole again, its belly filled with the dark, fragrant oil that once illuminated the darkness of night. A woman with a simple linen kerchief approaches you, her eyes tired yet steady. She offers you a small piece of flatbread, still warm from the oven, its crust crisp, the interior soft and fragrant with the scent of barley. She speaks quietly about the shortage of wheat, the grain shipments that once came from Sicily before the Treaty of 241 BC forced Carthage to rely on its own modest harvests. Her words are not complaints but observations, a quiet acceptance of the city's altered fortunes. She smiles faintly, a dry humor in the curve of her mouth, as she remarks that the Romans have built wooden towers behind the walls, a sight as real as the stale bread on the benches. You take the bread, feeling its warmth against your palm, and bite slowly, savoring the simple flavor. The taste is modest, the grain coarse, yet it grounds you, anchoring you to the present moment. The market continues around you, each stall a small island of activity, each vendor a keeper of stories that have been passed down through generations. The air is thick with the scent of incense, the faint metallic tang of iron from the Roman engineer's tools, and the sweet, earthy aroma of barley porridge that still lingers from the neighbor's kitchen. As the sun climbs higher, the shadows lengthen and shift, the light softening the colors of the market's wares. The murmuring crowd begins to thin slightly, some citizens retreating to the cool interiors of their homes, others lingering to finish their purchases. You stand, feeling the cool stone beneath your feet, the weight of the day settling gently upon you like a familiar cloak. The market's rhythm has steadied, each breath a measured inhalation, each exhale a quiet release. You turn away from the stalls, the faint echo of the lyre still resonating in the distance, and walk toward the narrow alley that leads back to the courtyard of your domus. The stone walls of the market close behind you, their surfaces still warm from the morning sun, the faint imprint of Roman boots still visible in the dust. The city's pulse continues, a low, steady beat that matches the rhythm of your own heart, a reminder that even under the looming threat of siege, life persists in its quiet, measured way. You step out into the courtyard, the olive tree's shade offering a cool respite, and let the soft murmur of the market linger in your mind like a gentle tide. The day ahead will bring more tasks, more whispers of Roman engineers, more moments of quiet irony, but for now you allow the calm of the market's rhythm to settle within you, a steady, soothing breath that steadies the thoughts of a city that has endured for centuries. The lingering scent of the market's spices and the faint echo of distant drums become part of the day's quiet tapestry, and you feel a quiet gratitude. You slip back through the narrow gate that opens onto the street you have walked since childhood, the stone steps cool beneath the soles of your sandals. The air that greets you carries the faint, lingering chill of the night that has just passed, a thin veil of mist that clings to the low arches of the Biasa and rolls lazily over the cobbles of the Tophet quarter. Above you, the outer wall of the city rises like a silent sentinel, its ancient stones still bearing the fresh mortar that the masons laid yesterday, the pale streaks of lime catching the first pale light of dawn. The wall's surface is pocked with the scars of Roman siege works, small, deliberate gouges where engineers have driven their augers into the limestone, leaving behind a pattern that resembles a field of tiny, stubborn weeds. You pause for a heartbeat, feeling the weight of those marks settle into the rhythm of your breath, a reminder that the city's endurance is measured not only in grand battles, but also in the slow, patient work of stone and mortar. Your steps lead you to the courtyard of your domus, a modest square of packed earth shaded by the sprawling canopy of a lone olive tree that has watched 3 generations of your family grow and wither. Its twisted trunk is gnarled, the bark cracked and darkened by centuries of sun and sea wind, its silver-green leaves whispering softly in the morning breeze. The olive's roots have pushed deep into the earth, finding water in the hidden springs that feed the city's cisterns, and its fruit, now few and shriveled, hangs like tiny amber beads against the muted sky. You run a hand along the rough bark, feeling the ridges of age beneath your fingertips, and a quiet smile lifts the corners of your mouth, an ironic gratitude for a tree that outlives the empires that rise and fall around it. Inside the house, the cool stone floor is still damp where the night's dew has settled, the tiles worn smooth by the countless feet that have passed over them. A bronze lamp hangs from a low wooden beam, its oil flickering in a slow, steady pulse that throws gentle shadows across the walls. The lamp's light catches on the faint dust motes that drift lazily in the air, each one a tiny, glittering reminder of the stillness that pervades the space. The scent of smoke rises from the hearth, a thin, sweet aroma of burning olive oil that mingles with the faint, earthy smell of the stone. The fire itself is modest, a few orange tongues licking the iron grate, its heat enough to keep the chill at bay, but not enough to chase away the quiet darkness that lingers in the corners of the room. Your mother stands at the hearth, her back bent in the familiar curve that has carried her through countless winters. Her hands move with a practiced rhythm, kneading the dough for flatbread on a low wooden board that bears the scars of countless meals. The dough is soft and warm, the flour dusting her forearms like a pale veil. She hums a low, wordless tune, a melody that has been passed down from her mother, who learned it from the women who tended the kitchens of Carthage during the Punic Wars. The tune is simple, almost mournful, its notes drifting like smoke through the room, a quiet counterpoint to the distant rumble of Roman drums that sometimes echo off the city walls. You watch the way her fingers press and fold the dough, the way the surface of the bread rises and falls under her touch, each motion a small act of defiance against the uncertainty that presses on the city's doors. She offers you a piece of the dough, still warm from the hearth, its surface speckled with tiny bubbles that have formed as the yeast worked its slow magic. You take it with reverent hands, feeling the heat seep into your palm, the softness of the bread yielding under your fingers. The taste is plain, the flavor of wheat and water, but it carries with it the weight of generations, of mothers who fed their children during sieges, of fathers who returned from battle with hands calloused by the plow and the sword alike. You bite slowly, savoring the texture, the way the crust gives way to the tender interior, and a faint, dry smile touches your lips. The moment is quiet, almost ceremonial, a reminder that even in the face of looming legions, the simple act of sharing food can anchor a Soleil bronze lamp sways gently from its hook, its flame casting a wavering light across the room. The lamp's oil, made from pressed olives, burns with a steady amber glow that seems to pulse in time with your own heartbeat. You notice a small scar on your left forearm, a pale line that runs just above the wrist, a memory of the summer when you helped mend a broken cartwheel during the previous harvest. The scar is faint now, its edges softened by time, but it still catches the light when you move your arm, a quiet testament to perseverance. You run a thumb over the raised tissue, feeling the faint roughness, and the memory of that day surfaces without fanfare. The splintered wood, the stubborn axle, the patient patience required to coax the wheel back into motion. The scar, like the city's walls, bears the marks of effort and endurance, a silent record of work done without fanfare. Your younger sister, Alyssa, sits cross-legged on the cool stone bench near the doorway, her eyes lowered as she folds her hands around a small clay bowl. She whispers a prayer to Tanit, the goddess whose bronze statue stands in the shrine at the far end of the courtyard. Her voice is barely audible, a soft susurration that rises and falls like the gentle lapping of waves against the harbor's piers. The prayer is simple, a plea for protection and for the safe return of those who have gone to the frontiers to gather supplies. The words are ancient, their cadence unchanged since the days when Carthage first rose from the sea, and they carry a quiet, steadfast hope that seems to settle into the stone around you. You watch the way the candlelight catches the faint sheen of the bronze idol, the way the flickering flame reflects off its polished surface, and you feel a subtle, dry amusement at the notion that even the most powerful deity must listen through the thin veil of smoke, and all beyond the courtyard. The Roman legions have begun to construct a circumvallation that circles the city like a slow spinning loom. 4,000 infantry and 200 cavalry march in disciplined rows, their armor clanking softly against the stone as they set up wooden towers and earthworks. The engineers work with a meticulous patience that seems almost absurd, laying beams of oak, still green and fragrant, into place, their sap exuding a faint, sweet scent that mingles with the lingering incense from the hearth. You hear the distant thud of hammers, the rhythmic tapping that echoes off the walls, a metronome that marks the passage of time as surely as the sunrise. The site of the Roman siege works is a stark contrast to the intimate domestic scene within your home, yet both exist side by side, each a thread in the tapestry of the day. You settle onto the cool stone bench that runs along the inner wall of the courtyard, its surface worn smooth by countless generations of feet. The bench is positioned beneath the olive tree, its shade offering a respite from the growing warmth of the sun. You feel the stone beneath you, solid and unyielding, a grounding presence that steadies the mind. The wind brushes past, carrying with it the faint scent of the sea and the distant, metallic tang of Roman iron, an ever-present reminder of the encroaching threat. Yet the wind also brings the soft rustle of olive leaves, a gentle susurration that feels like a lullaby whispered by the city itself. Your mother's hands continue their work, the dough now resting under a damp cloth, the cloth's fibers pressed gently against the surface, keeping the heat in. She glances up occasionally, her eyes meeting yours for a brief moment, a silent exchange that says more than words could. In that glance you see the fatigue of years, the quiet resignation that has settled into the lines of her face, but also a spark of resolve that refuses to be extinguished. She lifts a small piece of dough, folds it into a ball, and places it on a wooden tray, the sound of the wood against the dough a soft, muffled thud. The tray is set aside, ready for the oven that will bake the flatbread later in the day. A small, cracked amphora lies at the edge of the courtyard, its once smooth surface now marred by a fissure that runs like a thin river across its belly. The amphora once held oil, perhaps, or wine, but now it sits empty, its purpose forgotten. You run a finger along the crack, feeling the coolness of the broken glaze, and you think of how even the most durable vessels can break under pressure, a quiet, ironic parallel to the city's own fortifications. The crack does not threaten the amphora's existence. It simply becomes part of its story, a reminder that imperfection can coexist with function. The water carrier arrives, his leather sandals splashing softly in the shallow basin that collects rainwater from the roof. He lifts a heavy clay jar, its surface glazed with a faint, earthy brown, and carries it to the fountain at the center of the courtyard. The fountain's stone basin is fed by a small aqueduct that runs beneath the city, its water clear and cool, a lifeline that has sustained Carthage through sieges and droughts alike. He pours a measured amount into the basin, the sound of water spilling over stone, a gentle, rhythmic patter that blends with the distant murmur of Roman voices. The water's surface catches the light, creating tiny, dancing reflections that seem to flicker like fireflies caught in a glass jar. You watch the Roman soldiers as they move along the outer wall, their shields glinting in the weak morning light, their helmets polished to a dull sheen. Their presence is a quiet, oppressive weight, yet you notice a small, almost imperceptible irony in the way they pause to adjust a strap on their sandal, as if the act of caring for a simple piece of leather could somehow soften the harshness of their purpose. Their disciplined steps are measured, each footfall a soft thud that reverberates through the stone, a reminder that even the most formidable armies are composed of individuals with mundane concerns. The day stretches forward, the sun climbing higher, its light growing warmer, casting longer shadows across the courtyard. The olive tree's leaves rustle in a gentle breeze, the sound a soft, continuous whisper that seems to echo the heartbeat of the city itself. You inhale deeply, the air filling your lungs with a mixture of smoke, stone, olive, and distant sea, a blend that feels both familiar and foreign, a reminder that life persists even as the world around it shifts. You rise from the bench, the stone cool against your skin, and walk toward the hearth once more. The fire has dimmed, its orange embers now a soft, reddish glow, the flames having given up most of their vigor to the night's chill. Your mother turns the fire, adding a few fresh pieces of kindling, the crackle of new wood a subtle, comforting sound. She looks up, her eyes meeting yours again, and in that moment you sense a quiet resolve, a shared understanding that the days ahead will be measured not by grand gestures, but by the steady, patient rhythm of daily life. The day's tasks continue. The baker will bring fresh dough to the oven, the water carrier will refill the basin, the children will play in the shadows of the courtyard, their laughter a soft ripple that lifts the weight of the siege, if only for a moment. You feel the steady rise and fall of your own breath, matching the pulse of the city, the rhythm of the olive tree's leaves, the muted thrum of Roman drums in the distance. The world feels ordered, as if the impending storm has been replaced by a gentle tide that ebbs and flows with a predictable grace. You settle back onto the stone bench, the coolness of the stone seeping through your clothing, grounding you once more. The olive tree's branches sway lightly, casting dappled patterns on the ground, the light shifting with each subtle movement. The air is still, the only sounds the soft rustle of leaves, the faint crackle of the hearth, and the distant, measured clank of Roman tools. In this quiet you find a steady calm. The night air settles over the city like a thin veil, heavy enough to mute the distant clatter of Roman drums, yet light enough to let the scent of sea salt and iron drift through the narrow lanes. You stand on the threshold of your courtyard, the stone beneath your feet still cool from the day's heat, and listen to the low, steady thrum that rises from the outer works. It is not a roar. It is a pulse, a measured heartbeat that seems to echo the very stone walls that have guarded Carthage for centuries. The legions that have encircled the Baissa move with the deliberate cadence of a machine that has known only order, their wooden palisades catching the pale moonlight and turning it into a series of thin, skeletal ribs that stretch across the horizon. You notice how the shadows they cast fall in straight lines, as if the night itself were being measured by a ruler. A thin mist curls along the cobbles, rising from the harbor and the low-lying streets, carrying with it the faint metallic tang of Roman iron and the lingering aroma of barley porridge that escaped from a neighbor's kitchen earlier. The mist settles on the arches of the Tophet quarter, softening the harsh angles of the city's ancient sanctuaries, and you feel the cool droplets kiss the back of your neck. The air is damp but not chilling. It holds a quiet promise that the night will not be broken by sudden fire, only by the slow, inevitable grinding of time. A lantern, held by a weary sentinel, flickers in the distance, its flame wavering as the man adjusts the olive oil lamp that hangs from a wooden post. His shoulders are bent from the weight of his duty, yet his movements are practiced, each turn of the wick a small ritual that has become as familiar as the rise and fall of your own breath. You watch his silhouette pause at the base of a wall, his face briefly illuminated by the soft glow, revealing a tired expression that carries both resignation and a faint, almost imperceptible curiosity. The sentinel's eyes scan the perimeter, catching the glint of a broken tile at the foot of the wall, a tiny imperfection that reminds you that even the most formidable fortifications are made of stone and mortar. Not of unbreakable resolve the Roman engineers, organized under the banners of Legio I Germanica and Legio I African, have begun to raise wooden towers that loom like the ribs of a long-dead animal against the night sky. Their construction is methodical, each beam placed with the precision of a carpenter who has measured his work against the standards of the legion. The oak beams are still green, their sap exuding a faint, sweet scent that mingles with the incense still lingering from the morning's rites to Baal Hammon. You note how the scent is oddly comforting, as if the city's ancient deities are offering a quiet reassurance that the rituals of the past still have a place even now, when foreign soldiers are setting up their siege engines. A low, monotone voice drifts over the walls, belonging to a commander whose words are as dry as the ration list he recites. He speaks of discipline, of supply lines, of the need to keep the men in step, as if he were reading a grocery list aloud to an audience that has long since stopped listening. The cadence of his speech is almost hypnotic, a reminder that the Romans have turned even the art of war into a bureaucratic exercise. You find a small, dry chuckle rising within you, a dry humor that acknowledges the absurdity of a man who can speak of logistics, while the city's granaries are forced to stretch barley and dried figs thin enough to make a farmer's sigh seem generous. The night sky above the city is a tapestry of constellations that have guided sailors for generations. You can still see the familiar patterns that once led Carthaginian triremes across the Mediterranean, their points of light steady and unchanging despite the turmoil below. The stars seem indifferent to the siege, their cold fire a silent witness to the human drama unfolding on the stone below. You inhale the cool air, feeling it fill your lungs like a soft sigh, and allow the quiet rustle of leaves on the balcony to calm the restless thoughts that the approaching siege has stirred. The wind carries with it the faint sound of distant waves, a reminder that the sea has always been a boundary and a conduit, both separating and connecting. Your thoughts drift to the daily rhythms that have continued despite the looming threat. The water carrier still climbs the narrow steps to draw water from the cistern, his bucket clanking against the stone as he makes his way back to the courtyard. The baker, his hands dusted with flour, pushes his dough into the oven, the heat of the fire a small, steady beacon against the chill of the night. Children, their voices hushed, move like shadows between the walls, their laughter a soft echo that seems to defy the seriousness of the moment. You notice how each of these small actions, each ordinary breath, forms a lattice of continuity that holds the city together, even as the outer world presses in a faint, metallic clink reaches your ears from the direction of the Roman siege towers. It is the sound of a hammer striking a beam, a rhythm that repeats with the patience of a clockmaker. The engineers work with a quiet determination, their movements almost ceremonial, as if each strike were a prayer for the success of their enterprise. You cannot help but think of the irony in the fact that these men, trained to build roads and aqueducts, now apply the same meticulous care to the construction of instruments of war. Their discipline is admirable, yet it carries a melancholy, for it shows how the same skills that can create life-sustaining infrastructure can also be turned toward destruction. The lantern's flame sputters as a gust of wind brushes past, sending a thin wisp of smoke curling upward. The smoke rises and disappears into the night, merging with the mist that hangs low over the city. You watch the smoke's slow ascent, its movement deliberate and unhurried, and feel a quiet kinship with its journey. Both you and the smoke are caught in a moment that stretches between the past and the present, between the certainty of stone walls and the uncertainty of what lies beyond them. A small, cracked amphora lies at your feet, its once smooth surface now pitted and broken. It once held oil or wine, perhaps, but now it is empty, its contents long spilled and absorbed by the earth. The broken vessel is a quiet reminder that even the most durable objects can fracture under pressure, a metaphor that feels fitting for the city itself. Yet the amphora's shards glint faintly in the lantern's light, each fragment catching a fragment of illumination, suggesting that even in brokenness there is a trace of beauty. You turn your gaze toward the inner courtyard, where the pomegranate tree stands, its branches heavy with fruit that have been left to ripen in the cool night. The leaves rustle softly, a sound that seems to echo the promise you made years ago to your brother, a promise that now feels both distant and immediate. The tree's roots have held the soil together for generations, just as the walls have held the city together. You feel a gentle pull, a quiet tug of memory that ties you to the past and to the people who have walked these stones before you. The night deepens, and the drums of the Roman legions fade into a low, almost imperceptible hum, as if the earth itself is absorbing their vibrations. The silence that follows is not empty. It is filled with the subtle sounds of the city breathing, the creak of a wooden door, the soft sigh of a wind passing through a cracked window, the distant murmur of a prayer whispered to Tanit. Each sound is a thread in the tapestry of the night, weaving together the present moment with the countless nights that have come before. You stand still for a while longer, allowing the cool stone beneath your feet to ground you, the faint glow of the lantern to warm your eyes, and the rhythm of the night to settle into your bones. The tension that has been building throughout the day eases, not because the threat has vanished, but because the night offers a space where breath can be measured, thoughts can be softened, and the world can be held in a gentle, steady pause. The night settles and you return inside. The oil lamp in the courtyard flickers, its amber tongue licking the rough plaster and throwing soft, wavering shadows that crawl like quiet insects across the stone. You settle onto the low stone bench, the coolness of the slab seeping through the thin linen of your dress, a reminder that the night has not yet given up its chill. The air carries the faint scent of the sea, a lingering whisper of salt that has slipped in through the narrow alleys, mixing with the lingering incense of the recent rites to Baal, its resinous sweetness softened by the night's damp. A thin broth simmers in a shallow clay pot, the surface broken by occasional bubbles that rise and pop with a sound no louder than a distant sigh. Lentils, dark as the soil of the surrounding hills, float in the clear broth, their earthy perfume rising with each gentle stir of the wooden spoon. You dip a piece of flatbread into the broth, feeling the crust give way under the liquid, the grainy texture of the wheat a familiar comfort. The bread has hardened through the night, its surface cracked like the dry earth after a long drought, yet the heat of the broth softens its edges, releasing a faint, yeasty aroma that recalls mornings when the baker's ovens roared and the streets were filled with the smell of fresh dough. The taste is modest, almost austere, but it carries the memory of a time when Carthage's markets were laden with spices from distant lands, when a pinch of cumin or a dash of coriander could turn a simple stew into a banquet. You close your eyes for a moment, allowing the flavor to settle, and notice how the broth's warmth spreads through your chest, a gentle tide that steadies the pulse that has been quickening since the first Roman hammers began their relentless rhythm against the siege towers. The sound of those hammers reaches you even here, a distant, measured thudding that seems to keep time with the heartbeat of the city itself. It is not the frantic clang of battle, but a patient, almost bureaucratic percussion, as if the Romans are filing a ledger of stone and timber, each strike a line item in a budget of conquest. The irony is quiet, a dry smile in the back of your mind. The same patience required to weave a fine woolen cloth is now being applied to the construction of wooden towers that will one day lean against the very walls you have known all your life. The weaver Dido, whose hands have coaxed thread from flax for years, pauses in her work, her loom creaking softly under the weight of a half-finished tapestry. She lifts a strip of wool that has been frayed by the constant tension of the siege, its fibers splayed like tiny, exhausted soldiers. Patience, she mutters, her voice low, is a virtue the Romans could learn from us if only they would try weaving instead of building walls. Her dry humor hangs in the air, a faint echo that does not disturb the calm but adds a thin layer of irony to the night. You listen to the low murmur of conversation that drifts around the courtyard, each voice a ripple in the still water of the night. An elderly neighbor, whose name you have forgotten but whose face is etched with the lines of many harvests, speaks of the Senate's decree from 149 BC, the one that forbade Carthage from waging war without Roman permission. The law feels like a brittle thread stretched across a chasm, holding back a tide that has already begun to rise. The decree is mentioned not as a distant historical footnote, but as a present weight, a reminder that the city's autonomy is measured in the thinness of parchment and the fickle favor of distant magistrates. You think of the parchment itself, its fibers worn thin by countless hands, the ink of Roman officials drying into a faint brown that will someday crumble to dust. The law, once a shield, now seems more like a paper cut, sharp enough to remind you of the limits placed upon your people, yet not enough to stop the inevitable pressure. A small bowl of olives sits beside the pot, their dark skins glistening with a thin film of oil, the fruit of the ancient groves that have survived wars and famines alike. You pick one, feeling the slight resistance of the flesh before it yields, releasing a burst of briny flavor that mingles with the lentil broth. The olives are a reminder of the sea's bounty, a modest gift that has sustained generations. The taste is simple, yet it carries the weight of the harbor's history, where once mighty quinquiremes sliced through waves, their oars moving in unison like a well-trained chorus. Now the harbor is a quiet waiting room, its ships moored in a stillness that feels both resigned and hopeful. The irony of the situation is not lost on you. The same waters that once carried Hannibal's ambitions now cradle the quiet drift of Roman vessels, their black sails a stark contrast to the white canvas of your own fleet. The sight is a muted tableau, a reminder that power can be as fleeting as a tide. The night deepens, and the clank of Roman hammers becomes a metronome, steady and unhurried, as if the engineers are measuring time in the same way a farmer measures the passing of seasons. Their work is methodical, each beam of oak, still green, its sap exuding a faint, sweet scent, being hoisted into place with ropes that creak under the weight of both timber and intention. The scent of fresh wood mingles with the lingering incense, creating a layered perfume that is both comforting and unsettling. You notice a small Roman soldier, his armor polished to a dull shine, standing at the edge of the construction site. He adjusts his helmet, his movements precise, his gaze flickering over the city's walls as if searching for something beyond the stone. His expression is not one of hatred but of curiosity, a fleeting moment that hints at the humanity hidden beneath the uniform. The sight of him, a lone figure amid the collective effort, adds a quiet nuance to the night's tapestry. A child's laugh, soft and distant, rises from a nearby house where a family gathers around a modest fire. The sound is a reminder that life continues in the smallest of gestures, that even under the shadow of siege, the simple act of sharing a story or a song can stitch together the frayed edges of a community. You hear the faint strum of a lyre, its notes drifting lazily through the courtyard, each chord a gentle sigh that seems to soothe the stone itself. The music is not grand, but it carries a resonance that settles into the marrow of the night, a lullaby for a city that has known both triumph and terror. You take a sip of the broth, feeling the warmth travel down your throat, the liquid a thin veil that coats your throat and eases the dryness that has settled there from the night's air. The broth's flavor is modest, yet it carries the essence of the earth, the lentils' humble origins, the olive oil's richness, and the faint hint of herbs that were perhaps gathered from a garden that has not yet been trampled by the siege's demands. Each mouthful is a quiet affirmation that sustenance can be found even in scarcity, that the act of eating is itself a ritual of resistance. The bowl is simple, its clay body cool to the touch, its glaze cracked in places where the fire has kissed it too hard. The imperfections are a reminder that even the most utilitarian objects bear the marks of time, just as the city's walls bear the scars of Roman siege works. The conversation turns to the practicalities of the siege. A water carrier, his shoulders bent from the weight of the bucket, speaks of the dwindling supplies, his voice low and measured. He mentions the grain stores, each sack counted like beads on a rosary, the careful rationing that has become a daily prayer. The grain, once abundant, now feels like a precious relic, its presence a silent promise that the city can endure another day. You think of the fields beyond the walls, the rows of barley that have been left untended, the soil waiting for the touch of a plow that cannot yet reach it. The thought is a quiet ache, a reminder of the seasons that have been paused, the cycles of planting and harvest held in suspension. A soft rustle of leaves comes from the pomegranate tree that stands at the edge of the courtyard, its branches heavy with fruit that has not yet been harvested. The tree has watched generations come and go, its roots deep in the stone, its bark scarred by the passage of time. You reach for a half-eaten fig that lies on the bench, its skin bruised in places, the flesh soft and sweet. The fruit's texture is a gentle contrast to the hard stone beneath your fingers, its sweetness a fleeting comfort that brightens the night's muted palate. You bite, feeling the juice spread across your tongue, the flavor a reminder that even in hardship, nature offers small gifts. The fig's bruises mirror the city's own wounds, each spot a story of a moment when the world pressed too hard. The night stretches, each breath a slow, measured rhythm that aligns with the distant hammering and the soft murmurs of the courtyard. You become aware of the subtle interplay of sounds, the crackle of the lamp's flame, the occasional pop of the broth, the faint creak of Dido's loom, the muted thud of Roman hammers, the distant laughter of children, the rustle of leaves. Together they form a quiet symphony, a composition that does not demand attention but simply exists, a backdrop to the simple act of sitting and being. The world feels ordered, as if the looming storm has been replaced by a gentle tide that lulls rather than threatens. You glance at the stone walls that surround the courtyard, their surfaces pitted and scarred, each fissure a testament to the passage of centuries. The walls have withstood the Punic Wars, the sieges of earlier generations, and now the encroaching presence of Rome. Their stones are cool to the touch, their mass a steady anchor in a sea of uncertainty. You run a fingertip along a rough edge, feeling the grain of the limestone, the tiny imperfections that give each block its character. The walls seem to breathe with you, their ancient stones resonating with the quiet pulse of the city, a low, reassuring hum that steadies the mind. As the lamp's flame begins to wane, its light softening to a dim glow, you feel a calm settle over you, a gentle acceptance that the night will pass, that the broth will be finished, that the hammers will continue their patient work, and that the city will endure. The quiet resolve that settles within you is not a triumph, but a quiet acknowledgement of the endurance that has always defined Carthage. You close your eyes, letting the sounds and scents weave together into a single, soothing breath, and you allow the night to wrap around you like a familiar, comforting blanket. The peace you feel is a quiet, steady flame that will not be snuffed out by the distant clatter of Roman tools. It is enough for now to sit, to breathe, and to be. The night holds you. The night has already settled over the city, but the balcony that you occupy keeps a thin ribbon of moonlight stretched across the harbor, as if the sky itself were trying to trace the outline of every hull that rests in the water. The stone beneath your feet is cool, the kind of cool that has been worn smooth by generations of footsteps, each one leaving a faint imprint that the rain will soon wash away. You breathe in the salty tang of the sea, a scent that has always been a part of Carthage's identity, mingling now with the faint, lingering perfume of fish being salted in the open air. The brine is sharp, but it is softened by the distant aroma of cumin and coriander that drifts from a nearby stall where a vendor is still trying to sell the last of his dried herbs. Even though the market's bustle has long since faded into a hushed murmur beyond the low rail, the harbor spreads out like a dark mirror, reflecting the pale glow of the moon and the occasional flicker of a torch from a Roman ship. Their black sails hang limp, the canvas worn thin by the relentless wind that sweeps across the Mediterranean. The sight of those sails is a quiet reminder of the shift in power that has come over these waters. Once the city's own quinquiremes would have cut through the waves with confidence, their bronze rams glinting in the sun. Now the foreign hulls sit like patient predators, waiting for a moment that may never arrive. You notice the way the water laps gently against the stone quay, each small wave a soft percussion that seems to keep time with the slow, steady beat of your own Harte fisherman. His skin weathered by years of exposure to the sea, leans against the rail, his eyes narrowed not from anger, but from the habit of scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. He offers you a small dried fish, its flesh firm and amber, the kind that has been preserved the old way by sun and salt, so that it can survive the long stretches between catches. You take it with a nod, feeling the rough texture of the dried scales against your fingertips, a tactile reminder that even in times of siege, the simple act of sharing food remains a thread that ties the community together. The fish is not particularly flavorful. It tastes of the sea and of the patience required to keep a livelihood alive when the city's walls are being tightened around it. Yet there is a quiet dignity in the gesture, a dry humor in the way the fisherman says, "It will keep you from dreaming of fresh catches," as if the very act of eating something that has been stripped of its freshness is an ironic echo of the city's own stripped vitality. Your gaze drifts to a Roman scout standing a short distance away, his back to you as he leans over a wax tablet. The ink on the tablet forms neat, deliberate lines, each character a small, permanent mark on a medium that will outlast the momentary presence of his boots on the stone. The scout's posture is meticulous, his movements measured, as if the act of recording the harbor's layout is a ritual that grants him a sense of control in a place where control is otherwise slipping away. You notice the faint scar on his forearm, a pale line that catches the moonlight, perhaps a reminder of a previous skirmish or a careless mishap with a gladius. The sight of a Roman soldier, so far removed from the bustling streets of Rome, performing such a mundane task in the quiet of Carthage's harbor, carries a subtle irony that does not provoke laughter, but rather a quiet, almost imperceptible smile at the universality of human habits. The harbor itself feels like a waiting room, a place where the future is measured not in grand declarations, but in the slow, inevitable rise and fall of the tide. The water's surface is mottled with the reflections of lanterns from the Roman camp, tiny points of amber that bob gently as the waves move. Each lantern is a small, steady beacon, a reminder that the Romans have set up a camp not far from the quay, their presence a constant, low hum in the background of daily life. You can hear, faintly, the clink of metal as a blacksmith in the camp hammers a piece of iron, the sound traveling across the water and merging with the natural rhythm of the sea. It is a sound that could be mistaken for the distant echo of a bell, but it is, in fact, the ordinary work of a soldier maintaining his equipment, a task that seems both insignificant and essential in the grand scheme of a siege. Gentle breeze sweeps across the balcony, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and the faint, lingering perfume of incense that has been burned earlier in a nearby shrine to Baal Hammon. The incense smoke has settled into the stone walls, leaving a thin film that catches the moonlight and gives the entire scene a soft, hazy glow. You can almost feel the weight of the incense in the air, a reminder of the city's devotion to its deities even as the external threat looms. The ritual of offering incense has been a constant through centuries of conflict, a quiet act of faith that persists regardless of who holds the sword. The smoke curls lazily around the rail, forming delicate spirals that dissolve into the night, much like the hopes that rise and fall with each passing day. The harbor's wooden piers, once polished by the hands of Carthaginian shipwrights, now bear the marks of neglect and the occasional repair made with whatever timber is at hand. The planks are uneven, some warped by the salt water, others splintered where a careless foot has stepped too hard. You notice a small crack in one of the beams, a fissure that runs like a thin vein through the wood, a subtle reminder that even the strongest structures can develop hidden weaknesses. The crack does not threaten the pier's integrity, but its presence is a quiet metaphor for the city itself, still standing, still functional, yet bearing the invisible lines of strain that are not immediately apparent to the casual observer. A gull circles overhead, its wings beating a slow, deliberate rhythm that matches the pulse of the harbor. The bird lands briefly on the rail, its claws gripping the stone before it lifts again, searching for a morsel among the discarded scraps of fish. Its call is a short, sharp note that cuts through the night's stillness, a sound that seems both out of place and perfectly at home in this setting. The gull's presence is a small, almost unnoticed detail, yet it adds a layer of life to the scene, a reminder that nature continues its course regardless of human machinations. You watch the bird's flight path, noting how it follows the same invisible line each time, a pattern that feels reassuring in its predictability. The moon climbs higher, its light growing brighter, casting longer shadows across the water. The shadows stretch and contract with the gentle swell of the tide, creating a slow, breathing motion that feels almost meditative. You find your own breath aligning with this rhythm, inhaling the cool, salty air and exhaling slowly, feeling the tension in your shoulders ease with each cycle. The harbor, with its mixture of familiar and foreign elements, becomes a place of contemplation, a space where the mind can wander without the urgency that the city's walls often impose. You think back to the stories your mother used to tell you about the great naval victories of Carthage, the battles where the city's fleet outmaneuvered the might of Rome, and you feel a quiet pride that is tempered by the present reality. The pride does not roar. It sits in the back of your throat like a soft, steady hum, a reminder that the past is a foundation, not a guarantee. The irony of standing on a balcony that overlooks a harbor now shared with the very forces that once were adversaries is not lost on you, but it does not provoke anger. Instead, it settles into a gentle acknowledgement that history is a river that flows in circles, sometimes bringing you back to the same banks you have known all your life. A distant horn sounds from the Roman camp, a low, resonant note that seems to vibrate through the stone and water alike. It is not a call to battle, but a signal, perhaps a reminder for the soldiers to change watches, perhaps a simple acknowledgement of the passing night. The sound fades quickly, leaving a lingering vibration that you can feel in the soles of your feet. It is a reminder that the Romans, despite their imposing presence, are also bound by routines and rituals, just as you are. Their routines, however, are now interwoven with yours, creating a tapestry of overlapping lives that is both unsettling and oddly comforting in its normalcy. You shift your weight, feeling the slight give of the stone under your boots, and notice a small, smooth pebble that has rolled to the edge of the rail. It is warm from the day's sun, its surface polished by countless waves. You pick it up, turning it over in your hand, feeling the coolness of the stone against your palm. The pebble is ordinary, unremarkable, yet holding it gives you a sense of grounding, a tactile anchor that connects you to the present moment. You place it back on the rail, letting it settle among the other small stones that have accumulated over time, each one a silent witness to the countless days and nights that have passed here. The night deepens, and the harbor's sounds soften further. The occasional creak of a ship's rigging, the gentle splash of a wave against a hull, the muted murmur of Roman voices as they speak in low tones about supplies and routes, all blend into a single, low chorus that feels like a lullaby. The city beyond the balcony is quiet, its streets dimly lit by oil lamps that flicker like fireflies caught in a gentle breeze. You can hear, faintly, the soft rustle of a woman's dress as she moves through the courtyard of a nearby house, the sound of a child's soft sigh as they settle into sleep. These sounds, though distant, weave themselves into the fabric of the night, creating a sense of continuity that stretches beyond the immediate concerns of siege and survival. You let your eyes linger on the horizon where the sea meets the sky, a line that seems to blur under the moon's glow. The water reflects the stars, each point of light mirrored on the surface, creating a double sky that feels both expansive and intimate. In this reflected cosmos, the constellations that have guided sailors for centuries appear twice, as if the universe itself is offering a reassurance that the cycles of navigation and return will persist. Even if the ships that once sailed under those stars are now anchored or absentee final, soft breeze brushes the balcony, carrying with it a faint hint of citrus from a nearby orchard. a reminder that the land still produces its modest gifts despite the looming threat. The scent is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it adds a layer of sweetness to the night's palate, a small note of optimism that does not demand attention but simply exists. You inhale this fragrance, feeling it mingle with the brine and incense, creating a complex, soothing blend that settles into your lungs and steadies your thoughts. As the night stretches onward, you remain seated, the stone bench cool beneath you, the pomegranate tree's leaves rustling softly above. The harbor, the ships, the Roman scout, the fisherman, the gull, the distant horn, all are parts of a tableau that feels both static and alive, a living painting that changes only in the smallest of details. You sense that the city's pulse, though strained, continues its steady rhythm, and that your own breath is part of that rhythm, a quiet, measured cadence that will carry you through the hours ahead. The calm of the harbor, with its layered scents, sounds, and sights, settles around you like a soft, familiar blanket, inviting you to rest in its gentle embrace. You close your eyes, allowing the night's quiet to fill the spaces. The night has settled over the city like a thick, woolen blanket, its weight pressing gently against the stone that has held your family for generations. You step out of the domus onto the outer ramp, the coolness of the limestone seeping through the soles of your sandals. The air is thin, scented with the faint smoke of distant hearths and the metallic tang of iron that lingers from the Roman engineer's work. A soft wind threads through the narrow passage between the towers, carrying with it the low, rhythmic thud of a distant hammer, an echo of the siege engines being assembled beyond the walls. You pause for a moment, allowing the sound to settle in your chest, feeling it match the steady beat of your own heart. The stone beneath your feet is worn smooth by countless footsteps, each one a reminder that the city's pulse has never truly stopped, even when the threat of war looms like a shadow at the edge of a fire. You run a calloused finger along a fissure in the wall, noting how the mortar has begun to crumble in places where the Romans have driven their wooden piles into the foundation. The cracks are small, almost invisible, but they speak of a patience that is both patient and relentless, an irony not lost on you, for the Romans pride themselves on discipline while their siege works creep forward like a slow tie-day lantern held by a fellow sentinel flickers, its oil lamp casting a wavering circle of amber on the surrounding stones. The light catches the edge of a cracked amphora lying at your feet, its once glossy surface now dulled by years of use and a recent spill of cheap wine. The amphora's broken rim mirrors the way the city's defenses have been tested, each chip a tiny testament to the pressure that builds when an enemy encircles a place you have known all your life. You straighten, adjusting the strap of your own lamp, and the flame steadies, as if reassured by your touch. The watchtower ahead rises like a skeletal tree against the night sky, its wooden beams darkened by the soot of countless fires. Inside, a Roman auxiliary named Septimus leans against the rail, his eyes reflecting the same weary acceptance you have come to recognize in the faces of those forced to share this cramped space. He is a native of Carthage, born to a family that once traded olives and purple dye, now serving a legion that bears the eagle of Rome. His presence is a quiet reminder that the lines between friend and foe have blurred, and that survival often depends on the simple act of acknowledging another's humanity. He offers a faint nod, a gesture that carries more weight than any spoken word. From the parapet, you can see the faint outline of the Roman camp, a sea of tents and wooden structures that stretch like a low horizon. The soldiers move in measured steps, their boots muffled by the soft earth, their conversations low and pragmatic. A commander's voice drifts up, reciting a list of supplies as if reading a grocery inventory. Grain, water, oil, leather. The monotony of the enumeration is oddly soothing, a reminder that even the most formidable armies are sustained by the same basic needs that sustain you. You think of the ration of barley and dried figs that the city's granaries have been forced to stretch thin, a diet that would make even the most seasoned farmer sigh, yet it is enough to keep the body moving, the mind alert. The wind shifts, bringing with it the distant sound of a Roman siege engine being adjusted, a slow mechanical creak that seems to breathe in time with the night. The engine's gears turn with a deliberate patience, each click a metronome marking the passage of hours. You watch the shadow of the machine glide across the wall, its silhouette resembling the skeletal ribs of a long-dead animal, an image that lingers in the mind like a half-remembered dream. The irony is not lost on you. The Romans, masters of engineering, have built a device that moves as slowly as a tide, yet its purpose is to break the very stones that have protected your people for centuries. A faint rustle catches your attention, and you turn to see a small, cracked amphora lying at your feet, its contents long spilled. The broken vessel is a reminder that even the most durable objects can fracture under pressure, a truth that applies as much to stone walls as to the resolve of a people. You kneel, tracing the jagged edge with a fingertip, feeling the coolness of the broken ceramic against your skin. The amphora's story is simple. It once held wine, now it holds only memory. The memory is comforting in its simplicity, a small anchor in the vast sea of uncertainty that surrounds you. Above you, the night sky is a deep, velvety canvas dotted with stars that have guided sailors for generations. The constellations are unchanged, their patterns steady despite the turmoil below. You breathe in the cool air, feeling it fill your lungs like a soft sigh, and you let the quiet whisper of the wind thread through the crack in the wall. The wind's song is a low hum, a lullaby that soothes the mind as it brushes past the stone, carrying with it the faint scent of the sea and the distant aroma of fish being salted for preservation. The scent is a reminder of the harbor's constant rhythm, a place where commerce once thrived and now serves as a quiet waiting room for the future. Your thoughts drift to the ancient law Lex Iulia de Civitate, a decree that once granted Carthage limited autonomy under Roman oversight. The law now feels like a brittle thread, frayed by the weight of the legions that press against the city's perimeter. Yet the thread still holds, tenuously, and you find a strange comfort in its persistence. It is a reminder that even the most fragile agreements can endure when they are tended to with care, much like the small garden of herbs you tend in the courtyard of your home, where rosemary and thyme grow stubbornly among the stones. A distant clatter of a Roman soldier's armor reaches your ears, a soft metallic jingle that blends with the night's chorus. The sound is neither threatening nor comforting. It simply exists, a neutral note in the symphony of the siege. You watch as the soldier adjusts his greaves, the polished metal reflecting the lantern's glow for a brief instant before disappearing into the darkness. The soldier's movements are precise, disciplined, a testament to the training that has turned him into a machine of war. Yet in that brief flash of reflected light, you see a glimpse of humanity, a man who, like you, must endure the long hours of watch and the weight of expectation. The watch continues, the hours slipping by like grains of sand through an hourglass. You shift your weight, feeling the cool stone under your back, and you listen to the subtle sounds that make up the night. The soft creak of a wooden beam settling, the distant bark of a dog, the occasional sigh of a wind gust slipping through a narrow slit. Each sound is a thread in the tapestry of the evening, weaving together the ordinary and the extraordinary into a single, unhurried rhythm. As the night deepens, the lantern's flame begins to wane, its light growing softer, as if the darkness itself is gently coaxing the fire to rest. You lower the lamp, allowing the shadows to stretch across the wall, their edges blurring into one another. The darkness is not oppressive. It feels like a familiar companion, a veil that softens the harsh lines of the siege and the city's scars. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling the cool stone against your cheek, the faint vibration of distant drums resonating through the earth, and you let the world settle into a quiet, steady breath. When you open your eyes again, the first pale hints of dawn are beginning to creep over the horizon, painting the western wall with a muted amber glow. The Roman camp is still, the siege engines silent, as if the night itself has pressed a pause button on the machinery of war. The city's walls, though scarred, stand firm, their stones humming a low, reassuring lullaby that has echoed through centuries of conflict and peace alike. You feel the weight of the night lift, replaced by a gentle promise of a new day, and you let the calm settle within you like dew on the stone. You turn back toward the inner courtyard, the path illuminated by the soft, lingering light of the lantern. The stone bench beneath the pomegranate tree awaits, its surface warm from the night's lingering heat. You settle onto it, the coolness of the stone against your back a reminder that the world continues, unhurried and unflinching. The night's watch has ended, but its quiet rhythm remains within you, a steady pulse that will guide you through whatever comes next. In this moment, you breathe in the lingering scent of the sea, the faint perfume of the pomegranate blossoms, and you allow the night's serenity to linger, a gentle, unspoken promise that the world will. You settle onto the stone bench that has lain beneath the pomegranate tree for as many generations as the city's walls have watched the sea, the bark of the tree rough against the palm of your hand, its leaves trembling in a breath that seems to come from the earth itself. The courtyard is a shallow bowl of cool shade, the sun a thin band of amber that filters through the interlaced branches, painting the stone with a pattern of light and dark that feels like a quiet hymn. The air carries the faint perfume of ripe fruit, a sweet acidity that mingles with the lingering scent of the hearth smoke that has drifted in from the domus across the way. You close your eyes for a moment, allowing the scent to settle in the back of your throat, a reminder that even in a city under siege, nature insists on its small, stubborn cycles. Your thoughts turn, as they often do in these moments, to the promise you made years ago to your brother, the one who left the city with a small band of men to seek supplies beyond the hills that cradle Carthage. The promise was simple, spoken over a cracked bowl of lentil stew, return before the first Roman footfall crosses the outer gate. It was a pledge born of youthful certainty, of the belief that the city's walls could keep out any foreign tread. The memory of his bright eyes, the way his hand had brushed the bark of this very tree as he swore, surfaces now like a soft echo, unhurried and steady. The promise has become a quiet weight, not a burden, but a gentle reminder that you are still bound to a future that has not yet unfolded beyond the courtyard. The outer defenses are a different world. The legions, now under the command of the seasoned Scipio Aemilianus, though his presence has not yet been felt in the streets you walk, have begun to tighten their encirclement. Their engineers move with the patience of craftsmen, laying timber and stone in a rhythm that resembles the slow turning of a loom rather than the clamor of battle. The encirclement is not a wall of aggression, but a pressure that presses against the city's skin, a weight that settles like a stone upon a chest. You notice without looking the faint tremor in the ground as a distant hammer strikes a wooden beam, a sound that is both a reminder of human industry and a muted, almost ironic commentary on the futility of building something meant to break. The Treaty of 151 BC, a clause that once seemed a distant legal footnote, now hovers over the city like a thin veil of parchment. It barred Carthage from waging war without Roman consent, a restriction that feels as fragile as a dried leaf caught in a gust. Yet the city endures, its people moving through the days with a rhythm that has survived the Punic Wars of the 3rd century BC, the merciless debts imposed after the defeat, and now this siege. The law is a reminder that the world outside the walls is governed by agreements that are as mutable as the tide, but within the courtyard, the law is a quiet background hum, barely audible over the rustle of leaves. A distant chorus of children's laughter drifts through the narrow alleys, bright and unrestrained, a sound that seems to belong to another time. Their voices rise and fall like the gentle lapping of waves against the harbor, a reminder that life persists even as the world outside turns to stone. You can picture them playing a simple game, perhaps tossing a pebble into the shallow basin at the center of the courtyard, their giggles echoing off the walls and mixing with the soft sigh of the wind. Their innocence is a quiet rebellion against the heaviness that presses on the city, a reminder that hope can be found in the smallest of gestures. You reach for a half-eaten fig that rests on the bench, its skin a deep violet, the flesh soft and fragrant. The fruit bears a slight bruising, a darkened spot that spreads like a small wound on the surface of the city's own skin. You bite gently, the flesh yielding with a sweet, honeyed taste that lingers on the tongue. The bruised part is a little softer, a reminder that even the most resilient things can bear marks, that the city's wounds are not always visible in the crumbling mortar, but can be felt in the subtle changes of texture. The act of eating the fig feels like a small communion with the past, a quiet acknowledgement that nourishment can come from the remnants of what once was whole. The pomegranate tree itself is a living archive. Its bark is scarred in places where a child once carved a name, where a lover once tied a ribbon, where a storm once stripped a branch. The fruit hangs in clusters, each berry a tiny, jeweled globe, their skins taut and glossy. You notice a single berry that has split open, its ruby interior exposed to the air, the juice seeping into the soil below. It is a small, almost unnoticed rupture, yet it mirrors the city's own fissures, tiny, quiet, and yet part of a larger pattern. The tree's roots delve deep into the earth, drawing water from the same aquifer that supplies the city's cisterns, a reminder that beneath the stone and the siege, there is a shared source of life. A soft wind threads through the courtyard, slipping between the stones and rustling the leaves. It carries with it the faint scent of salt from the harbor, a reminder that the sea is never far, even when the city feels encircled. The wind also brings the distant murmur of the market, the low hum of voices bargaining over figs and wool, the clink of copper pots, the occasional laugh that is both weary and resilient. You can almost hear the market's rhythm, a steady pulse that has continued through wars and treaties, a heartbeat that steadies the mind. The wind's touch on your cheek is cool, a gentle caress that seems to say that even the smallest breath can carry the weight of distant places. You think of the promise again, of the brother who left with a small band of men, of the road that stretched beyond the hills, of the supplies they were meant to bring back. The promise was tied to a specific moment, a specific footfall, but now it feels broader, encompassing the entire city's endurance. The promise is no longer about a single step across a gate, but about the collective steps taken each day to keep the city alive. The water carrier's steady climb up the hill, the baker's patient kneading of dough, the weaver's careful threading of wool, the priest's quiet prayer to Tanit. Each of these actions is a footfall, a small imprint on the stone that together form a path of resistance. A faint rustle draws your attention to a small bird perched on a low branch of the pomegranate tree. Its feathers are mottled brown, its eyes bright, and it watches you with a calm curiosity. The bird sings a short, melodic trill, a sound that seems to echo the promise you made, a simple note that reverberates in the quiet. You smile, a small, private gesture, and the bird flutters away, its wings beating a soft rhythm against the air. Its departure leaves a lingering sense of movement, a reminder that even in stillness, life continues its quiet migration. The courtyard's stone bench, worn smooth by countless generations, bears the imprint of your weight. The stone is cool beneath your thighs, a steady presence that does not shift, does not complain. You feel the subtle vibration of the ground, a low hum that seems to come from the city's heart, a pulse that aligns with your own breathing. The breath you draw in is slow, filling your lungs with the cool, slightly salty air, and as you exhale, you feel a gentle release, as if you are letting go of a small tension that has settled in your shoulders. The rhythm of your breath matches the rhythm of the wind, the rustle of leaves, the distant laughter, creating a harmony that feels both ancient and immediate. Thought drifts in, almost unnoticed, about the irony of the Roman engineers' meticulous planning. They lay beams of oak, still green, still fragrant, onto the ramparts, their work precise, their purpose to breach the very walls that have protected your ancestors for centuries. Yet the same oak, once cut and shaped, will eventually rot, returning to the earth, becoming part of the soil that feeds the pomegranate tree. The cycle is quiet, almost poetic, a reminder that the tools of war are also the tools of renewal, that the same hands that build siege towers also sow seeds. The irony is not loud. It is a soft, dry smile that rests in the back of your mind, a quiet acknowledgement that history is full of such gentle contradictions. You glance at the sky, where the sun hangs low, casting long shadows that stretch across the courtyard like dark fingers. The light is muted, the colors softened by a thin veil of dust that hangs in the air, a reminder that the world is not bright and clear, but filtered through the experiences of those who have lived before. The shadows move slowly as the sun descends, each one a fleeting imprint that will soon be replaced by night's deeper darkness. The transition feels natural, inevitable, a quiet procession that mirrors the city's own shift from day to night, from activity to contemplation. The promise you made to your brother, the treaty that binds the city, the siege that presses upon the walls, all these elements converge in this moment of stillness. They are not separate threads, but part of a single tapestry, woven with the same careful hands that tend the pomegranate tree, that bake the bread, that mend the broken pots. The tapestry is not flawless. It bears knots and frayed edges, but it holds together, providing a sense of continuity that steadies the mind. You feel a quiet gratitude for this continuity, for the small rituals that persist despite the looming presence of the legions, for the ability to sit here under the tree and breathe. As the sun finally slips behind the western wall, the courtyard is bathed in a soft, dusky glow. The pomegranate trees' leaves rustle one last time before the night settles, and the shadows grow deeper, wrapping the stone bench in a gentle darkness. You remain seated, the half-eaten fig now a small, dark spot on the bench, a reminder of the sweetness that can be found even in moments of waiting. The wind carries a final, faint scent of the sea, a promise that the world beyond the walls continues its own rhythm, indifferent yet somehow connected to your own breath. You close your eyes once more, feeling the cool stone beneath you, the steady pulse of the city's heart, the quiet echo of a promise made long ago. In this stillness, the weight of the siege feels lighter, the future less opaque, because the present holds its own quiet certainty. The night deepens, and you let the calm of the courtyard settle around you like a familiar, comforting blanket. The promise remains not as a burden, but as a quiet, steady flame that will keep. The first pale light of sunrise slips over the western wall, a thin wash of amber that spreads slowly across the stone, as if the day itself is hesitant to wake. You stand on the low terrace that overlooks the outer ramp, the coolness of the night still clinging to the tiles beneath your feet. The Romans have begun to lower their siege towers, a deliberate motion that resembles the opening of a flower more than the crash of war. Each wooden frame slides down the rope-hauled pulleys with a soft creak, the sound muted by the damp air and the distant murmur of the harbor. The engineers, methodical as ever, have set the beams of oak still green, still fragrant against the ramparts. The scent of fresh wood mingles with the lingering incense that rose from the New Year rites to Baal, a reminder that devotion persists even when the city's walls are pressed by foreign hands. A small Roman soldier pauses at the foot of the tower, his armor polished to a dull shine that catches the morning light. He adjusts his helmet with a practiced hand, the metal clicking faintly, and looks toward the city with an expression that is more curiosity than hostility. You notice the way his gaze lingers on the pattern of the stonework, the same pattern your ancestors laid down centuries ago when the Biasa first rose from the hill. There is a quiet irony in the fact that a man whose ancestors once marched across the same plains now stands here, his boots dusted with the same sand that once slipped through the fingers of Punic merchant seller Hanno leans on his staff at the edge of the courtyard, his back slightly bent by the weight of years and the weight of memory. The staff is worn smooth where his hand has rested for decades, the wood darkened by countless suns. His eyes, steady and unflinching, reflect the amber glow that now bathes the harbor. He remembers the days when Carthage's fleet sailed unchallenged across the Mediterranean, when the sight of quinquiremes cutting through the waves was a source of pride rather than a reminder of loss. The sight of the Roman vessels, their black sails stark against the pale sky, brings a faint smile to his lips, one that does not reach his eyes but acknowledges the absurdity of history's cycles. The grain stores have been counted carefully since the siege began, each sack measured like a bead on a rosary. The granaries sit in the shadow of the wall, their doors reinforced with iron bands that have rusted in places, the rust a quiet testament to the passage of time. You think of the barley and dried figs that have stretched thin, the simple fare that has become a ritual of endurance. The water carrier lifts his bucket from the well, the rope creaking as he pulls it up, the water sloshing gently against the stone. He moves with a rhythm that matches the heartbeat of the city, his steps measured, his shoulders bearing the weight of the bucket as if it were a small piece of the siege itself. The baker pushes his dough into the oven, the fire within crackling softly, the heat rising in thin ribbons that curl around the brickwork. The scent of freshly baked flatbread mingles with the faint perfume of incense, creating a layered aroma that settles on the courtyard like a soft blanket. Children dart between the stalls, their laughter a quiet ripple that carries through the air, their feet pattering on the worn cobbles. Their games are simple, catching a stray stone, tracing patterns in the dust. Yet each movement adds a thread to the tapestry of daily life that refuses to fray under pressure. You feel the stone beneath your feet, cool and steady, as reliable as the rhythm of a seasoned drum. The walls, though scarred by the Roman siege works, hold fast, their stones whispering stories of endurance that span centuries. From the Punic Wars of the 3rd century BC to the present moment of tentative peace. A faint breeze brushes the arches, carrying with it the salty tang of the sea and the faint metallic scent of iron from the Roman camp. The wind threads through a crack in the wall, its sound a soft hum that settles in the back of your throat, a reminder that even the smallest openings can let in the world beyond. You notice a small, cracked amphora lying near the base of the wall, its surface pitted and its rim chipped. It once held oil, perhaps, or wine, now empty, its contents long spilled. The broken piece is a quiet symbol of the city's resilience. Even when the vessel is shattered, the shards remain, each one a fragment of the whole. You bend to pick up a fragment, the cool clay smooth under your fingertips, and place it back where it belongs. A small act of order in a world that feels increasingly chaotic. The sun climbs higher, its light growing steadier, the amber turning to a gentle gold that settles on the rooftops. The Roman engineers continue their work, their movements precise, their faces set in the same patient expression that has guided countless constructions across the empire. Their tools, iron tongs, wooden mallets, make soft, repetitive sounds that blend with the city's own chorus of daily chores. There is a strange harmony in the juxtaposition. The methodical building of a siege alongside the methodical kneading of dough, the lowering of towers alongside the lowering of a water bucket. You draw a slow breath, feeling the fresh morning air fill your lungs, cool and clean, as if the day itself is offering a quiet promise. The light settles on the pomegranate tree in the inner courtyard, its leaves rustling softly, the fruit hanging heavy with a deep, muted red. The tree has witnessed generations of your family, its roots intertwined with the stone foundations of the domus. You remember the promise you made to your brother, the vow to return before the first Roman footfall crossed the outer gate. The promise feels both distant and immediate, a thread that ties the past to the present, the personal to the collective. The city breathes around you, each inhalation a measured rhythm, each exhalation a release of tension. The siege, though still present, seems to recede into the background, its urgency softened by the ordinary motions of life that continue unabated. You stand still for a moment, allowing the quiet to settle like dew on the stone, the calm spreading through you as gently as the sunrise spreads across the walls. In this measured light, the world feels ordered, the impending storm replaced by a gentle tide, and you let the quiet promise. The sun has already slipped behind the western wall, leaving the sky a wash of muted violet that deepens with each breath you draw. You settle once more on the stone bench that has cradled generations of your family, its surface worn smooth by countless feet, its edges softened by the slow erosion of wind and rain. The pomegranate tree above you spreads its dark leaves like a quiet canopy, each leaf trembling faintly as a gentle breeze threads through them. The fruit hangs heavy, its skin glossy and bruised in places, a reminder that even the sweetest things carry the marks of time. A thin layer of dust settles on the bench, the kind that gathers when the city's rhythm slows to the pace of a slow tide. You brush it away with the back of your hand, feeling the cool stone beneath your palm, the same stone that has withstood the siege engines of Rome and the earlier assaults of rival powers. The texture is familiar, almost comforting, as if the stone itself remembers the weight of your ancestors' hopes and the quiet resolve of those who have come before you. The camp beyond the walls has settled into a hushed routine. The clatter of swords that once rang like a warning now sounds only in distant memory, replaced by the occasional crackle of a cooking fire where Roman soldiers tend to their simple meals. The firelight flickers, casting a soft amber glow that reaches the outermost stones of the fortifications, painting them with a hue that seems to soften their harsh edges. You notice a lone soldier, his armor dulled by the day's work, turning a piece of stale bread over the coals. The bread is hard, its crust cracked, yet he eats it with a quiet efficiency that speaks of long campaigns and the habit of making do with what little the supply lines provide. There is a faint irony in watching a man who once marched under the banner of conquest, now tending a modest fire, as if the grand ambitions of empire have been reduced to the simple act of warming a bowl. The walls themselves bear the scars of the months that have passed. Some stones are chipped, others bear the faint imprint of Roman tools, the shallow gouges left by pickaxes, and the occasional splinter of wood from hastily erected towers. Yet the majority of the masonry stands firm, each block set with the care of the Carthaginian builders who first raised the Biasa in the 3rd century BC. You run a fingertip over a particularly smooth slab, recalling the stories your mother told of the original mortar, mixed with lime and sand from the nearby hills, a mixture that has held together more than just stone, families, traditions, and the stubborn hope of a people who have endured countless sieges. A young boy from the neighborhood, no older than 10, darts across the courtyard with a small stone in his hand. He pauses at the edge of the water basin, a shallow stone pool that once collected rainwater for the household's use. With a careful flick, he sends the stone skimming across the surface. The ripples spread outward, intersecting in a delicate lattice before fading into stillness. The sight is simple, yet it carries a weight that feels larger than the act itself. Each ripple is a quiet reminder that even the smallest gestures can set in motion patterns that linger far beyond the moment. You watch the water settle, the surface returning to its glassy calm, and feel a soft echo of that same principle resonating within you. The air carries a faint melody, the sound of a lyre being plucked by an older woman who sits near the fire. Her fingers move with practiced ease, drawing out notes that drift lazily over the courtyard, their cadence unhurried, as if each tone were a breath. The music is not grand. It is a modest tune that has been sung at many family gatherings, at harvest celebrations, and now in the quiet of an uneasy peace. The melody weaves through the stone and the trees, threading itself into the fabric of the evening, a gentle reminder that culture persists even when the world outside threatens to unravel it. Your thoughts turn, as they often do, to the promise you made to your brother when he left for the frontier to gather supplies before the siege tightened. He had taken a small wooden box, sealed with wax, and promised to return before the first Roman footfall crossed the outer gate. The gate has long since been crossed, and the legions have settled into a rhythm that feels more like a prolonged occupation than a fleeting raid. Yet the promise remains, a quiet thread that ties you to a future you cannot yet see. The memory of his voice, steady and hopeful, surfaces as you watch the fire's glow dance across his empty space. You feel the weight of that promise settle comfortably upon your shoulders, not as a burden, but as a familiar garment you have worn many times before. The evening deepens, and the sky darkens into a deep indigo, speckled with the first stars of the night. The pomegranate tree's silhouette becomes a dark outline against the heavens, its branches reaching outward like quiet arms. A soft rustle of leaves accompanies the distant murmur of the harbor, where Roman ships now lie anchored, their black sails motionless in the night breeze. The harbor, once a bustling hub of Carthaginian trade, now holds a quieter, more tentative presence. You recall the stories of the quinquiremes that once cut through the Mediterranean with ease, their oars a rhythm that matched the heartbeat of the city. Now the water is still, the only movement the gentle lapping of waves against the stone pier, a sound that soothes like a lullaby. A Roman scout, his cloak damp from the sea, steps onto the stone walkway near the wall. He pauses, his eyes scanning the city's interior, noting the placement of the pomegranate tree, the arrangement of the benches, the pattern of the lanterns. He writes on a wax tablet, the ink forming neat lines that contrast sharply with the cracked stone beneath his feet. The act feels oddly out of place, a moment of bureaucratic order amidst the organic decay of a city under siege. You watch him for a moment, noting the faint smile that flickers across his face when a stray wind dislodges a loose stone, as if the universe were offering a small, private joke. The night air grows cooler, and a faint scent of rosemary and dried figs drifts from the kitchen windows where your mother continues to bake. The aroma mingles with the faint smoke from the Roman campfires, creating a layered perfume that is both comforting and slightly oppressive. The rosemary, a herb that has long been used to ward off ill health, seems to hold a quiet promise of resilience. You inhale deeply, feeling the coolness settle in your lungs, each breath a reminder of the steady rhythm that has carried you through the days of uncertainty. You rise from the bench, the stone cool against your legs, and make your way toward the inner courtyard. The path is lit by a series of oil lamps, their flames steady, their light amber and unhurried. The lamps cast long shadows that move slowly as the fire consumes the oil, each flicker a small heartbeat in the night. You pause at the doorway, looking back at the pomegranate tree, its leaves rustling softly, as if whispering a farewell to the day. The tree has stood through wars, through famines, through the quiet moments of everyday life. Its roots run deep, anchoring it to the soil that has fed your family for generations. Inside, the courtyard is quiet. The stone floor is cool beneath your feet, the air still, save for the occasional sigh of a distant wind. You sit once more on the bench, this time with your back against the stone wall, feeling the faint vibration of the city's pulse through the masonry. The lyre's melody fades, leaving a lingering resonance that seems to settle into the very stones. You close your eyes, allowing the sounds of the night to fill the space within you. The distant murmur of the harbor, the soft crackle of a Roman fire, the whisper of leaves, the faint hum of a distant chant that once rose in celebration of festivals now paused. Your mind drifts to the grain stores, the sacks of barley and wheat that have been counted and recounted, each grain a tiny testament to the city's perseverance. The careful rationing has taught you the value of measured consumption, of taking only what is needed, of finding contentment in modest portions. You think of the baker who pushes his dough into the oven, the rhythmic thump of the wooden paddle against the stone hearth, the smell of fresh bread that briefly lifts the weight of the siege. These small, ordinary acts form a tapestry of continuity, a pattern that persists despite the looming presence of the legions. The night deepens further, and the stars above become brighter, their light traveling across centuries to reach this moment. You feel a quiet connection to those who have looked up at the same sky, from the early Punic settlers who first built the walls, to the Roman soldiers who now camp beyond them. The constellations are unchanged, their stories unaltered by the rise and fall of empires. In their steady glow you find a sense of permanence, a reminder that while human affairs shift like sand, the heavens remain a constant, quiet witness. A soft rustle draws your attention to the edge of the courtyard, where a small cat, its fur matted and its eyes bright, pads silently across the stone. It pauses, arches its back, and looks up at you with a gaze that seems to ask for nothing more than acknowledgement. You offer a gentle hand, feeling the roughness of its fur, the warmth of its body against the cool night. The cat settles beside you, its purr a low, steady vibration that blends with the distant hum of the city. In this simple companionship, you sense a quiet affirmation that life continues in its smallest forms, even when larger forces threaten to overwhelm. You remain there, the night wrapping around you like a familiar blanket, the pomegranate trees silhouette a dark guardian beyond the walls. The promise to your brother rests in your heart, not as a heavy chain, but as a quiet compass pointing toward patience and hope. The Roman legions, their fires now dimming, their voices lower, seem less like an imminent threat and more like a distant storm that will pass in its own time. The city's stones, the olive tree in your courtyard, the lyre's lingering notes, the cat's soft purr, all converge into a single, steady breath. As the last ember of the fire fades, you feel a soft resolve settle within you, a calm acceptance that the night will pass, that the city will endure, that each breath you take is part of a larger, unhurried rhythm. The darkness deepens, the stars shine steadier, and you let